Hi, we're excited to present our session today, Ensuring Your Estate Plan is Ready for 2025. My name, again, is Cynthia Azami. I'm the Director of Plan Giving for the West Coast. I'm joined by my colleagues, the other Directors of Plan Giving, Robin Dermer in Florida, Bill Adolph in Midwest, and Allison Nagelberg in the Northeast. First, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for your partnership with Jewish National Fund and for continuing to stand with Israel during these difficult times. None of us could have imagined the horrors of October 7th, and it's hard to believe the war is still ongoing 426 days later. With your help, Jewish National Fund has been there for the people and land of Israel before October 7th and the year plus since, and will be there well into the future. On that day and the weeks and months that followed, we helped evacuate tens of thousands of people from both the South and the North. Because of your generosity, we were able to provide housing, basic necessities, medical care for those evacuees. And now, because of your help, we are able to say that 85% of those people living along the southern border have been able to move back home. We've conducted volunteer trips since December of 2023 with several thousands of people just like you traveling to Israel on JNF missions to help wherever was needed. Our current rebuild campaign is on track to bring all the evacuees home. We are concentrating on security issues, mental and physical health issues, water, food, and energy security. We are confident our efforts will be successful, especially in light of your generosity and the generosity of JNF donors across the United States. If you are interested in making a donation before the end of the year, please contact one of us. We are here ready and willing to help. We want to make sure that your gift, this is what the Plan Giving Department does, maximizes your tax benefits while you are making the world a better place. Whether you're giving cash, stock, real estate interest, money from your IRA, and other assets, we are here to help make sure that you're getting the biggest bang for your buck. Thank you. We're excited to be hearing from Mark Horowitz with Morgan Stanley and Avi Kestenbaum, a partner with Meltzer, Lippe, Goldstein, and Brightstone. They're going to be discussing the possible upcoming tax law changes as well as estate and income tax planning solutions. Of note, Jewish National Fund has partnered with Jewish Future Promise. This is a nonpartisan, nonprofit whose mission asks that if you are leaving any money to charity in your will or your trust, that half of those dollars go to Jewish and/or Israeli causes. This is not a legal or binding pledge, it's a moral promise. And it's in the spirit of Tikkun Olam that we are asking you for your help with Jewish continuity for the present and future generations. I would like to now take this opportunity to introduce Mark, who will then take it from there. Mark Horowitz is the Managing Director, Wealth Management, Senior Portfolio Management Director, and Financial Advisor with Morgan Stanley. With over 25 years of experience in financial markets, Mark provides comprehensive wealth management strategies and services for high net worth individuals and their families. Mark was recognized by Forbes as a best in-state wealth advisor for the past several years, including in 2024. He works diligently to understand each individual's many and distinctive financial needs and to help support their current and future investment goals. Please help me welcome Mark Horowitz.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. My real claim to fame is that I've been the financial advisor to the Jewish National Fund now for 20 years. When I started, I didn't have a single gray hair, and look what's happened to me in that time. None of that has to do with the JNF. It's truly an honor to be affiliated with this organization. I wasn't asked to give them a plug, but I will. We work with many non-for-profits, and we're fortunate to have such a substantial role in the health and the lives of non-for-profits. But JNF has always stood out above them all in their diligence, in the diligence with which they apply, and they go about managing their assets, allocating those assets, preserving those assets, And it's just been an unbelievable pleasure for me to be part of this organization. My team manages the CGA, the Charitable Gift Annuity Program, the donor advised funds, many of their special needs accounts, as well as their pooled income funds and charitable remainder trusts. And I open this up to every JNF donor. If you ever have a question about how the assets are being managed or any questions about finance at all, consider yourselves clients just from the mere fact that you are JNF donors. In my practice for the last 20 plus years, I've had the pleasure of meeting many trust and estates lawyers. Some are lawyers and some are we would call real mention, real people. I have nothing against lawyers, but some of them are just lawyers. And Avi is everything but that. Avi is one of the greatest people we know. He's the kind of lawyer you just want to go out and play golf with or schmooze with or have coffee with. But he also happens to be one of the best trust and estates lawyers we know. To make it where he got to be the chairman of Meltzer Lippe, which is a very prestigious firm, Avi is not only knowledgeable and expert at US tax law, he is also expert at international tax law as that pertains to assets or properties that you may have in Israel, and so on and so forth. Avi really spans the gamut of what there is to know about trusts and estates. But most of all, he cares about his clients, he cares about people, he cares about Israel, cares about charity, and I couldn't have picked a better person to head up this session. So with that, Avi, I turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark, very much. It's only downhill from here after that introduction. I don't even know what to say, but it's my privilege and honor to be speaking on behalf of JNF, an organization which I've been a fan of for many years. And I was thrilled when Mark and Joel reached out to me and asked if I would speak for a little while. So thank you. It's my privilege and honor. So I'm going to speak for about 35 minutes. And when somebody speaks for 35 minutes, there's only so much they can cover. And my goal is to try to provide something that they teach in law school, and that is to spot the issues. If I can give the audience some information to make them more knowledgeable and to give them some ideas, hopefully that can help them with their tax and estate planning. They could speak to their own advisors, and just maybe some ideas will percolate. The three topics that I'm going to cover, one is the expiring exemptions, gift and estate tax exemptions, which may or may not happen. The second is a little bit about charitable planning, maybe an idea or two. And the third is for people that may have children or relatives in Israel or own an Israeli apartment or asset, or Israelis that may have some assets here, just a little bit in that international space, which is becoming so much bigger as more people have family members that make Aliyah, or they even own apartments in Israel. Though for that matter, if they own apartments or real estate in other countries, a lot of the same principles will apply. So let's start. So one of the biggest questions I've been getting since Donald Trump won the election was, well, do I need to do anything? Because as many of you or most of you know, currently there is a 14, well, it's with indexed for inflation, it's soon to be about a $14 million per person gift and estate tax exemption, right? So a husband and wife could potentially have a $28 million gift and estate tax exemption. Of course, as again we know, in approximately 1 year from now, that law changes and the exemption goes down to 5 million indexed for inflation. Maybe it'll be about 7 million of an exemption. So as the law is currently written, the gift and estate tax exemption is cut in half. So before the election and leading up to the election, many of my clients were panicking. Hey, we're going to have a year to do this planning, maybe less. What if the laws are changed sooner? And very, very nervous, even finding a trust and estates lawyer who could help them, because so many people were doing planning, trying to take advantage of their gift and estate tax exemptions. Donald Trump, of course, wins the election. We also have a Republican-controlled Congress. And hey, is there any rush to do anything? That's the question. Why am I rushing? Why do I need to do anything? And or what should I be doing? And what are the pros and the cons? So let's focus on this. As everyone knows, the law, well, I keep saying as everyone knows, maybe I'm taking that for granted, but the law as currently written, the estate tax exemption gets cut in half in 1 year from now. So it's still an assumption to say, well, the president and Congress, the new president and Congress are going to be passing a law to continue this $14 million gift and estate tax exemption. It certainly is likely to happen, but no one can say for certain. And also right now in the House, I think it's a very thinly majority to, or thin majority to the Republicans. There'll be midterm elections, maybe it'll change, but no one knows exactly what's going to happen. And I do know right now the exemption gets cut in half. Secondly, for people who live in New York, don't forget about the state estate tax or the state death tax. And there are other states that have this as well. And the New York estate tax exemption is only about $7 million per person, that number that the federal is supposed to come down to. So when people say, hey, maybe I could wait, I shouldn't do anything, I remind them, hey, the law is still supposed to change as currently written. And also, if you live in New York or you have New York real estate, you're still potentially subject to the New York estate tax. And it's nothing to laugh or sneeze at because it's a pretty harsh tax. And the New York estate tax starts once you're a little bit over that exemption, it hits you from $1, the so-called cliff effect. Unlike the federal estate tax exemption, it hits once you get over. The New York one, once you get over by a little bit, it starts at $1, and it makes it a very harsh tax, even though it's at a lower rate. Now, I know we have people from all over the country on this Zoom, so different states have different rules regarding their own state death and estate taxes, but we have to keep that into account. The other thing, as I alluded to, was, well, we've got the Republicans in control right now. What happens in 4 years from now? So I really hope everyone on the Zoom lives a very long life, and maybe we'll be talking again in 4 years, hopefully less than that. So, let's not take for granted that this is how the law is always going to be. The estate tax with this high exemption applies to very, very few people across the country, much less than 1%. And there's every reason to feel like this exemption, it has to come down. It's just too high already. It doesn't even make sense. When I started practicing over 20 years ago, 25 years ago, the exemption was maybe $675,000. Maybe it was even less. And it gradually went up. And then all of a sudden, a few years ago, it doubles. And that was under Trump. So I think we just need to be mindful. The exemption is as high as it's ever been. And certainly there could be policy reasons to bring it down in the future. Now, when people say, well, should I make gifts to my children to get it out of my estate? We also need to keep in mind there are both tax reasons, like the gift and the estate tax, but also there are control reasons. Just because somebody wants to get money out of their estate, there are techniques where they can still control the funds. So sometimes we use an LLC, and the LLC, for example, maybe is owned by a trust for a child or for a spouse, but your client who makes the gift could still be the manager of that LLC and controlling the investments of those funds. And when I say your client, I'm used to speaking to other lawyers, but you can still be controlling those funds. Secondly, there are attorneys who, even if somebody makes a gift to an irrevocable trust, they will allow their client to still be the investment trustee and to make the investment decisions. Again, I don't personally do that. I use the LLC approach, but just because somebody makes a gift doesn't mean they're actually giving away the investment control. There are ways to still control the investments. Secondly, very often people are creating a trust, an irrevocable trust to get it out of their estate, but the trust is primarily for their spouse. And then only after the spouse is no longer living, it's for their children. So a couple that's been married for many years, maybe there's a comfort level as long as their spouse is alive, they will still have access to the funds through their spouse, and their spouse can even create a trust for them. Some of you may have heard the term the SLATs, the Spousal Lifetime Access Trust. You just have to make the trust a little bit different. But there are techniques where even if somebody gifts assets out of their estate, A, they can still control the investments, and B, they could still have access, excuse me, to the funds. Even if somebody is single, there are potential techniques where they can get the asset out of their estate, but still have some level of income from the trust. There are techniques where people can sell assets to a trust in a non-taxable transaction, still get an annuity or an income stream. And there are a whole bunch of other techniques. I don't want people to think, hey, I'm being told to do estate planning. I have a large estate. I'm not ready to give it away. I don't want to give it to my children or grandchildren yet. And I always say, you're not giving it away yet. You're just getting it out of your estate for death tax purposes, but there are ways to still have access to funds and still control the funds. And it's a very important point I think people miss. Again, the rules are technical. One has to be careful, but there are a lot of great techniques. To me, the main reason to stop giving away those assets and to really do a careful calculation from a tax point of view is the step up in basis or the step down in basis. As again, most of us are probably aware, when you're investing with Mark Horowitz and Joel Bodner, and you've been with them for a while, your portfolios have at least quadrupled in value. I'm going to say that you've only been with them a year or two, but if you've been with them longer, who knows? So you're sitting there with very low basis investments. And if you hold them and you sell them, well, you'll pay an income tax. There are techniques to deal with that too, setting up a trust in a jurisdiction that has no state income tax, like Florida, like Nevada, South Dakota. But let's just say if you sell those investments, you will have federal income tax and you may have state income tax as well. However, if you hold those assets until your death, your heirs will take those investments with a step up in basis with the date of death value as their tax basis. And when your heirs sell those investments, they will have no income taxes. Or even if they wait to sell them, they'll start with a brand new basis. So there is an advantage to dying, and that is the step up in basis. It's not an advantage to the person who dies, but it is an advantage to their heirs. So for a lot of clients, it's not really that smart from a tax point of view to be moving assets even into an irrevocable trust for their spouse and kids, because they could be giving up that step up in tax basis at death. There are a lot of factors to weigh, here in doing the analysis, but that's an important one. So that's why the question becomes stronger. Well, the exemption is very high. And if I transfer my assets to deal with the gift and estate taxes, that's great. But I just gave up the step up in basis, and I want my children to really benefit from these assets. They won't have an income tax when they later sell the asset. I just want to, say briefly, my approach is transfer the asset. As long as you're comfortable with your spouse, with your kids, we give you investment control. We go through, when and how you can access it for the following reason. There are always ways, once somebody has gifted to a trust, especially a grantor trust, that they could get it back. That step up in basis, it doesn't worry me. There are lots of ways to substitute assets, borrow assets. I don't worry about that step up in basis, because that once you do the planning, it's not over yet. It's fluid. You're monitoring the accounts, which trust owns what, and there are ways to get it back. But if you don't transfer those assets and you pass away and you get hit with gift and estate taxes, it's too late. So again, just from a philosophical point of view, if somebody is on the fence with transferring assets, I at least explain to them there are ways to control it, there are ways to access it. And in terms of the step up, let's not worry right now. There are ways to get the assets back. Again, so many different scenarios, so many different personalities in estate planning within the family. But the point is that there are ways to deal with a step up even after the assets are transferred. And to me, that shouldn't be lost in the planning.
Avi, it's Mark. You told me to interrupt you with questions. So
yeah, please. I hate talking to myself. Yeah.
So you mentioned the concept of swapping assets, which I think I found over the years very few people know about. We've saved our clients tens of millions of dollars over my career of capital gains tax by doing swaps. Would you talk to the audience, explain exactly what the word grantor and a grantor trust means and how swapping assets work and how that's advantageous?
Sure, my pleasure. So a grantor trust is a trust where the grantor, the creator of the trust, still pays all the future income taxes of the trust, still gets the depreciation from the trust. It's basically the trust is ignored for income tax purposes. It's all traced to the grantor. And even if the trust is an irrevocable trust for the benefit of his wife and kids, not a beneficiary, it's not revocable, it's irrevocable, it can still be drafted as a grantor trust with certain provisions that the trust is still taxed to the grantor. Because the trust is still taxed to the grantor for income tax purposes, that means any transaction between the grantor and this trust for income tax purposes, it's ignored because they're the same taxpayer for income tax purposes. So suppose the example that I gave before, I transfer assets to a trust for my wife and kids of highly appreciated assets, right? My portfolio with Mark and Joel, 10 million of assets, basis of 2 million. It's sitting in that trust, and I'm thrilled. No death taxes to my kids when I die. My wife can still get money. My kids can get money. Maybe I could borrow money. Maybe my wife did the same thing for me. I'm happy. But Mark and Joel say to me, Avi, well, maybe that wasn't so smart because you don't really have such a large estate anymore. You have some exemption remaining. Why don't you get back some of these assets? We actually put them back into your estate. And I said, well, how do I get them back into my estate? I already gave them away. And the answer is, actually, there are a few answers. The answer that Mark was referring to is, I literally can transfer other assets into the trust, cash, maybe real estate that hasn't appreciated in value, maybe even a promissory note, though there's some technical issues with a promissory note. And I get back that portfolio, and my trust has the other assets, which may include my promissory note. Then I pass away, and there's a step up in basis because I got the assets back. However, I got an equivalent amount of assets into the trust with my substitution. And not only that, if I did it with a note, and again, there are some technical tax issues with the note, it could be I brought back 10 million of these assets in my estate to get the step up. But because I owe the trust $10 million, the net effect is my estate has a zero value for estate tax purposes. So it's a little bit tricky. There's some after death, there's some income tax rules. But the point is, it's a fabulous technique. And that's why even after you do your planning, you move things into trust, as Mark said, you got to always still keep up on this. Look what's there. Look at the tax basis. The other way, of course, to get assets back to me is, A, there could be a distribution to my wife. I could borrow assets. I mean, there are a whole bunch of different ways.
So Avi, I'm gonna share with the audience a recent example. So just in case it puts a thought into people's minds. As our clients age, they tend to become much more conservative, and they tend to keep the more risky assets outside of their estate. So it's not uncommon for a client that has a $50, $60 million portfolio to have kept back let's say 10 or 15 million dollars in treasuries or fixed income, and they've transferred all of the highly appreciating assets to the trust. So we recently sat down with a family which that was exactly the case. They had put into trust shares of NVIDIA and Microsoft that were worth combined $5 million. And I'm not making up these numbers. Their entire cost basis was $7,000. So this was sitting inside the trust, and we picked this up at the first meeting, and we explained to them what we can do here. Because she was elderly and she wasn't well, the mother, we basically now put the NVIDIA and the Microsoft back into her estate, and we moved all her treasuries and bonds into the trust. Unfortunately, she passed away within 2 to 3 months, and she got a complete step up in basis, and they saved themselves the capital gains tax of about 25-30% on $5 million. So that's just an example that's of recent memory.
Yeah, no, amazing. And that's why tax basis needs to be consistently monitored. Everyone's so focused on the gift and the estate tax, have to pay attention to basis. One minute war story, which is really shows us just like Mark's story. We had a client who owned a big building in Manhattan worth a lot. We won't say the numbers, but hundreds of millions. And they got it out of their estate when they were young, transferred it to a trust for the kids. Really low basis, literally buildings worth hundreds of millions. And again, I'm just for illustration purposes, the basis is next to nothing. They depreciated over the years. When the man was elderly, we had him buy the building back from the trust, partially for a note, partially for funds, to get a step up in basis, literally hundreds of millions. Well, we got audited. Why did we get audited? Because the numbers were very big. And we went through the audit, and we had some non-tax reasons for this, which we knew we could get audited. Again, because of the size of it, and there had to be some rationale, and we were prepared, and we won the audit, and I got a case of champagne. So it was the case of champagne made all the planning worthwhile. Okay, let's move on to the charitable topic. It's really incredible to me that JNF has these such high-level advisors helping with donor advised funds and charitable, gift annuities, and all that stuff is amazing. So as you're aware, or keep saying as you're aware, I'm sorry, because I'm taking a lot for granted. I just know it's such an educated crowd. That's why I keep saying it. But a charitable gift annuity, the way it works is you give money for this charitable gift annuity for the benefit of JNF, and you get back for a term of years, the rest of your life, however it's set up, that there are different varieties of this, you get money back. And you're happy for the rest of your life, you get some money back. There's an inverse technique called a charitable lead trust. Now, the charitable lead trust is really for people who don't need the money right now, meaning they really don't need the funds. And for anyone who's donating every year to their foundation, to a donor advised fund, I mean, people that are donating serious money, what if I could tell you that you can give money to charity, and if you just wait 10 years, 15 years, they may be not coming back to you, I can get an equal amount coming back to your kids or to your grandkids. So I'm telling you that you donate your $1 million, could be less, but you donate that, you get your deduction, and if you just sit and wait 10, 15 years, depending on the term, you or your children could get that $1 million back. You would tell me, well, that sounds too good to be true. Well, the answer is, I feel sometimes it is. And that's how a charitable lead trust works. There are different variations, but the way it works is you make a contribution to this trust. The trust says every year for a term of years or your life, depending on how it's set up, money goes to charity. So your charitable lead trust is a personal trust your lawyer sets up for you. Every year, you tell the trustee, oh, give money to JNF give money to this favorite cause, and the charity is given over a term of years or your life. After that term of year ends, whatever is left, it can go back to you, it can go back to your family. So it's also an estate planning vehicle. The beauty is the IRS has an assumed rate of growth. Sadly, it just went up. It's called the 75/20 rate. It just went up to 5%. But last month it was only 4.4%, and historically it's been lower. If you, for example, have that charitable lead trust invest with advisors like Mark and Joel, that they're able to return more than 4.5%. That's what the IRS assumes. And they're able to get 8%, or dare I say 10%, at the end of the term of years, because you're beating the IRS's anticipated rate, you or your family will get back that money. So I ran an illustration earlier today. At 8%, assuming you've got the right financial professionals, knowing how to have enough income to distribute to the charity, you basically can get back almost all of it after 15 years. And I don't mean that you're going to get it back. You'll have to go to your children. You'll have to go to your grandchildren. So isn't that an incredible charitable technique? Now, if you don't want it back, of course, give it to charity. You know, this is not for people, you know, I would much rather you just give it to charity and you don't take anything back. But for people who, you know, they want something back in the end, if they just wait that term of years, because you will be beating the assumed rate of growth, you can actually get a lot of this back. And I oftentimes use this in large estates when somebody dies. If we want to avoid any estate tax, obviously it can go to their spouse if they have a spouse, marital deduction. It could also just go to charity. But a charitable lead trust, which Jacqueline Onassis actually had in one version of her will, was never funded, literally can provide. I actually have this for several clients that for 15 years charity gets money, or 20 years, depending on how we do it. At the end of that term, as long as we've beaten that rate, the family will get all that back. And again, if we can beat that 4.5%, it could almost be as much as what it was initially funded with. Mark and Joel, I'd love to hear your comments about this. I know it's a complicated topic to try to explain in a couple of minutes.
Well, we're big proponents of charitable lead trusts. We often get questions about whether to set up a charitable lead trust, whether to set up a foundation, whether to set up a DAF. I would ask you to tell the audience, Avi, what happens, God forbid, if a donor passes away before the term of the trust is over?
Sure. So with a charitable lead trust, if it's set up like I typically set up for a term of years, the donor's death has no impact because of the fact that charity is getting money for a term of years. At the end of the term of years, whether it's going to the donor's family, typically to the donor's family, because it's also a great gift and estate tax technique. It's a way to get them money without using any exemption, or if you have no exemption left. But if it's for a term of years, then no effect. Charity gets money. If it's for their lifetime, then it could really be a home run where charity was supposed to get money, meaning let's say somebody on the tables, you use certain tables, has a 20-year life expectancy. So the tables show that charity gets money for 20 years and eventually when the person dies goes to their family. Sadly, if somebody passes away prematurely, the charity unfortunately doesn't get as much, but their family gets a windfall because they're going to get a lot of money much sooner than expected. This is very technical stuff, but the point is it can be used sometimes if somebody's not well, as long as they have at least a year life expectancy. They need to have some life expectancy. It can be used. Mark, did I answer the question well enough?
You did. I'm going to ask one more question, which I get from clients all the time. So if I put money into a charitable lead trust, how does that work with regard to charitable deductions? When do I get that deduction? And what happens inside the trust? Is the trust itself taxable or not?
Great question. Of course, Mark asked an incredibly technical question that I'm now supposed to explain in 5 minutes. And I'm joking because Mark knows his stuff very, very well. So there are two main types of charitable lead trust, at least if somebody creates while they're alive. There's only really one type if they set it up in their will at their death. The first type is a grantor charitable lead trust, where you get an immediate income tax deduction going in, an immediate deduction, but every year, even though money's being given to charity, the grantor will still pay the income taxes. That happens to be the one I use the most because my clients, they want an income tax deduction. They set up, again, they put the money in the trust, they get an immediate charitable deduction. Every year for a term of years, money goes to charity. It's an upfront charitable deduction. And then at the end of the term, goes to the family. There's another type of charitable lead trust called a non-grantor charitable lead trust, where there's no deduction up front, but the way it's managed, there's also no income tax every year, meaning we're able, through clever investing, because money's going to charity, to basically wash away the income taxes every year. The reason why I use the grantor one more frequently is because many people, I see them, they're already donating to a donor advised fund. They're already donating to a foundation. And I tell them, that's great. I don't want to change what you're doing. But if you want to do that and still have your family get back whatever you're putting in 15 years, you could use this charitable lead trust with some technical rules. Okay, let me turn now to the, hopefully we're getting some questions. And again, Mark and Joel should interrupt me, but the topic of Israel, which is near and dear to our hearts. If somebody owns, a US citizen who's living in the United States, owns real estate or an apartment in Israel, be very, very careful. Forgetting about death taxes for a moment, because a US citizen, remember, owes US estate taxes on his or her worldwide assets. I don't care if you own an apartment or a condo on the moon. That's a worldwide asset. You're paying potentially US estate taxes. But probate, when somebody dies, the process of submitting the will to the court, getting an executor appointed, passing the asset to whoever is supposed to get it. If somebody only has a US will and the apartment is in Israel, that creates a major complication later. They end up needing to submit the US will to the probate court here, getting an apostille, getting it sent to Israel to be used, to be submitted to the court there. Hopefully the court there understands it, because remember, it's in a different language and there may be very technical provisions. Israeli wills tend to be short, sweet, and simple. And that process, from experience, can take a year or more, 2 years, 3 years. It could take a very, very long time. If instead the person has a US will for their US and maybe their worldwide assets, except for Israel, and have a separate will in Israel just for that Israeli apartment or piece of real estate, that will save so much trouble and hassle, and it's really easy to do. You don't even need the attorney to be in Israel. I've learned how to do Israeli wills. I've gone over them with Israeli lawyers. They tend to be very simple. So that's a little trick. But also don't forget estate taxes. Some people say, my assets in other countries, whether Israel or somewhere else, and what does it have to do with the United States? And the answer is, you're a US citizen. It has plenty to do with the United States. You need to be careful. The other point, which is a little more complicated, is if any of your children or grandchildren live in Israel and you've set up a trust, you have to be very careful. There may be current reporting requirements. I'm in the United States. I have nothing to do with Israel, except I love the country. But my child made Aliyah, my grandchild made Aliyah, and I set up a trust, and they're a beneficiary or a future beneficiary. They could already have reporting requirements, and the Israeli tax authority I'm sure is a wonderful institution, but they can be very rigid. And second, if there is a distribution, there is potential for tax in Israel on top of the tax that was already paid here. And Israel changed its trust rules, I think it was 2014. The rules are draconian. Ask any Israeli tax and trust lawyer, they'll tell you, A, they have trouble understanding it, B, it's very, very harsh. So just be very mindful. A lot of people have relatives in Israel and they set up US trusts and they're not really thinking there could be an effect that they have family in Israel. But Israel, again, could assert penalties and reporting just because the child is a beneficiary, even if they haven't received any funds. And if they do receive funds, they do receive distributions, it could subject to a tax in Israel on top of the tax here. There are filings, and there are some strategies. There is an election that can be made at the time the trust is established, how to tax it in Israel. B, there are some strategies not to mix an Israeli beneficiary and a US beneficiary in the same trust. Don't mix them together. If you have children in different countries, typically you're going to want different trusts for them, not all of them in the same trust. There are some other rules here, but again, I just want to make people aware of this issue. Mark and Joel, have you seen this a lot in your practice come up, especially the last few years?
It's going to start coming up after this call, that's for sure. I was not aware, I myself own apartments in Israel. I was not aware of what the hassle would be to enforce my US will in Israel. And this is very helpful to me to know.
Okay, yeah. No, it's a pain in the neck and it takes a lot of time.
So Cynthia has some questions from the group. Cynthia?
Yeah. So a lot of our donors, and I think a lot of the people on the call have questions about using their IRA for gifts. And then also, maybe if you could go into leaving the IRA to charity versus leaving it to heirs like children, and how that works. And maybe we don't have that much time, but maybe even add in the charitable remainder trust. I'm not sure if that's something you've been doing.
Sure. So I'm going to give just one or two quick points, and I'd love to hear also from Mark. I tell people their IRAs, they're great during life. You avoided income tax. But then what happens is, obviously, there's income tax when it comes out. And not only that, if you have a large estate, there could be estate taxes on top of that. And even though there could be some deduction one from the other, the rate could be as high as 70, 75%. And if it's going to grandchildren, there's generation skipping tax exemption. Maybe you're going to owe the government, more than just the IRA, and that's a joke. But a lot of it has potential to be gone. So people who are charitable anyway, that is the best asset to leave to charity upon their death. Meaning, if somebody is going to wants to leave 500,000 to charity, 1 million, 100,000, whatever it is, I tell them, be smart. Leave that from the IRA, name, or the 401k. Name the charity as the beneficiary, because to the charity it doesn't matter, but to your family, they would much rather get other assets than get this, really not a great asset. Under the new rules that came into being a few years ago, the family at least with a regular IRA, well, I guess it's going to be with a Roth too, they'll have to take it out within 10 years, depending on their age and their circumstances, but typically within 10 years. So absolutely, it's such a great asset because the cost of giving it to charity is really not great, because your children aren't really losing that much anyway because of all the inherent tax obligations. Now, are there more sophisticated techniques, leaving the IRA to a remainder trust and other things? There are, but I have to tell you, Cynthia, I just tell them, leave it directly. Don't get ultra complicated. Leave other assets to your children. The charity will love this. The loss to your children, especially if there are both estate and income taxes, is negligible. And look what an amazing thing you can do for the charity.
Avi, I totally agree with you. Would you say the same thing if a client had a Roth IRA?
Great question. So probably not. Probably not. Obviously, the Roth is difficult to plan with from a gift and an estate point of view, right? So regular assets we can gift, we can put them in trust, we can take them out of the estate. We don't want to take that money out of the Roth. So there certainly could be estate taxes there, but not so much with income taxes. So, excellent point. It's so funny. I'm so used to dealing with regular IRAs and not as much with Roth. But Roths are obviously, amazing. And admittedly, I'm not the greatest expert with them. I know there are, even for affluent people, there are ways to convert.
Exactly.
Actually,
again,
Mark, maybe you want to comment on the conversion and maybe
so a
how
lot of
charitable planning would
yes,
play
we've
into
been
that.
helping a lot of clients do conversions in their latter years when it becomes apparent that they don't need that income. So their RMDs coming out of their Roths are just basically we're paying tax on them. It's getting shoveled into a pile of cash. And it's kind of silly, right? On the flip side, we don't want to do a full conversion because then we throw them into a very high tax bracket. So what we do is we work closely with clients and their tax professionals to slowly peel away the IRA year over year and shovel that into a Roth, if you will. The reason why you wouldn't want to leave the Roth to charity is that your children will get 10 years of compounding tax-free on that money. And that's one of the best vehicles to leave your children, which is why we help clients convert to Roths in the first place. But Abby's 100% right. It's part of your estate. And, the children will pay, if you have a taxable estate, they'll be paying estate taxes from anything other than the Roth. They want to keep the Roth intact as much as possible. But there's no question that speaking to your advisor about converting to a Roth, especially if you're in a low tax bracket and you don't have a whole lot of income, could make sense.
And when you say slowly peeling off, and just so everybody knows, obviously the traditional Roth, when you take your RMDs out of a traditional Roth, you're paying income tax on that. But if you have a traditional IRA, you're paying income tax on that. But with a Roth, you don't owe income tax. So Mark, when you
Exactly. Well,
convert
so
to the Roth, what
right.
does that mean when you say peel off?
Exactly. Let me explain. Thanks for asking me to clarify. So let's take a client that has a $500,000 traditional IRA. And their RMD is $35,000, $40,000 a year, right? And if they take that RMD, right, then they basically pay the tax, they keep the cash, and they don't spend it. Instead, they could take that $35,000 and then convert it straight to a Roth and pay tax on hopefully other money. So get the whole 35 into their Roth and pay tax on that 35 from other money. So they've now placed $35,000 into an account that's going to compound during their lifetime, and then 10 years thereafter, tax-free. What I say peel off is, why wouldn't I just do the whole 500? Well, the $35,000 doesn't push them up into a higher income tax bracket. So if they're, let's say, in the 18 or 22% income tax bracket, I want to keep them there or maybe slightly higher. But if I take out $500,000 in 1 year, well, guess what? They shoot right up into the 37% bracket, and we don't want to do that. So we kind of play this game every year, depending on other incomes, to try to peel off whatever we can and still keep them in that tax bracket that they were in. So we coordinate this very carefully with their accountants. And then at the end of the year, when we have a good picture of their tax situation, we will make that conversion for them.
Got it. So I
would
think
say one very important point, which I think we're all sort of converging on, is that to do estate planning properly, it's not just the estate lawyer, it's not just the financial advisor, and it's not just the accountant. This needs to be a three-headed monster approach, because there are so many issues here. You have estate issues, you have probate issues, you have income tax issues, you could have international issues. So really, maybe if anyone's going to take anything from here, there's no one advisor who can possibly advise a client properly for them really to get, call it the best estate plan that they can get.
Correct. To Avi's point, the reason why I've become proficient in estate and tax planning isn't because I was bored. It's because I look at myself as a general practitioner and I'm the one that's speaking to the clients on a weekly or monthly basis. So I have to be able to recognize and then bring in people like Avi when I see that there's something that needs to get done. So you really want to make sure that there's somebody looking at everything that you're doing on a regular basis and saying, this is the best or not the best way to do this. And then here's who you need to sit down and talk to. There are strategies that you need to do. There are many clients who don't realize that there's a sunset of the law coming in 2025. Nobody's bringing it to their attention. The example I gave before, a client who had all of their appreciated assets out of their estate and all their unappreciated appreciated assets in their estate. And nobody ever brought that to their attention. And that would have cost them about $2 million, $1.5 million of capital gain tax. And it just, the right set of eyes had to take a look at it to bring that to the forefront. And then we brought in the lawyer and we took care of it all.
Yep. So
And
we're
on that
kind of
note, I thought you-
wrapping up, and I was just going to ask for final comments.
Oh, I'm
So go ahead,
sorry.
Avi.
I got so excited with this. So this step up in basis, and this is great. So if somebody has an older parent who maybe doesn't have so many assets, we've done planning to transfer assets to a trust for that older parent. Give that parent certain rights in that document. The parent passes away. There is a step up in basis. And the child or the child's family can get back that asset with a brand new basis. Now, there are rules. You can't just give it to that older person and get it back within a year. The government tries to stop that. There are rules, but there are techniques. I've done this for many clients, specifically who have real estate that have negative basis, meaning they've depreciated, they pulled out money. It's an incredible technique. And, the joke is, go to a home for seniors, find out who doesn't have a lot of funds, and ask them if they're willing to be a beneficiary of your trust. So, you could use their exemption. And I wouldn't go that far, but, literally under the law, there are things like that you can do, and they're very helpful. So I apologize for interrupting you. I just got so excited about one. Yeah.
No, I was just going to ask for wrap-up remarks, and I am so sorry I did not introduce Joel Bodner. He's a senior vice president with Morgan Stanley and works really closely with Mark and with Jewish National Fund with us. And I'm so sorry, Joel, I did not mention you before. But if you guys want to kind of give your final remarks.
Avi, I just have one last question. Maybe you can end with that. For those of us that are not yet at the stage where we're worrying about estate taxes and perhaps haven't reviewed our wills and plans in a while, can you throw out just a couple of quick bullet points of things people should be maybe revisiting with their attorneys, whether it's power of attorneys, medical directives, beneficiary updates, or things like that, just to make sure things are up to date, regardless of all the tax changes that may or may not apply to them?
Excellent. The taxes sometimes take control over the estate planning, but for most people, the taxes is by far not the most important item. So definitely everyone needs a healthcare proxy. If one can't make a healthcare decision, that somebody can make it for them, somebody who is going to make the decision that they would want. Typically, under many states, you can only have one person at a time. Can't pick two people together. It's going to be one person, maybe a backup or two. Be careful with your children. You don't create a fight that you're picking one and not the other. You may want to explain this to them. Power of attorney in case one isn't well or one is on vacation and can't be found, that somebody can make a financial decision for them. Be careful with that power of attorney. Does it allow gift giving? There's been a lot of mischief with powers of attorney. I'm power of attorney and I use it to gift money from my parents to myself, to my kids, and not to my siblings. So one has to be very careful with these seemingly innocuous documents. And of course, the will, be careful who you name as executor. There are executor commissions. It's also a hard job. Trustees for your kids, people who have young children. Be very careful of who you're naming in those documents. I'll say something else, which could be a longer discussion. Husband and wife. It's not so simple that if a husband and wife, if one of them dies, they just say, not a big estate. They say to the other, you get everything. Because what happens, this is the circle of life. Their spouse could get remarried. Their spouse could have another boyfriend or girlfriend, and the children get left out. And this is where you would go to somebody like Mark and Joel, and maybe they'd say, you know what? Maybe have a separate life insurance policy just for the kids, that the kids, no matter what happens to the spouse. So there are some thoughts here that people just take for granted. I'm naming this person, and they're really not thinking, oh, guardian for their kids. They're going to name somebody in another country or in another state. Do you realize that means, your kids are going to have to move? So the non-tax aspects, we could have another whole seminar, and that I'm so happy Joel asked that. That gets lost in translation, and that's by far more important than any tax conversation.
Except that we're Jewish, Avi, and we hate taxes more than anything else.
Right.
Well, thank you, Avi, so much. Thank you, Mark and Joel. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. If you have any questions, we're happy to talk to you. Just give us a call. And if you're thinking about, again, making end of year gifts, it's already December 5th. Things get busy at the end of the year. And so we ask you to contact us sooner rather than later. And we're just here to help you make the most out of your Tikkun Olam. And just thank you for joining us.
Thank you.